Hello. Crossed my mind I should probably finally do a video that at least briefly goes over current use disorder criteria from the DSM, or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, 5th edition. The one that we've been using in the alcohol and drug field, the mental health field, the social service field, the legal field, the medical field. The criteria that we've been using for the last couple of years. If you've seen anything that I've posted on Twitter or Facebook or my blog page or writing that I may do on a city sidewalk or something, you may have noticed that I mentioned some time back that we no longer have clinical criteria for alcohol or other drug dependence. In other words, they took away our clinical ability to declare somebody an alcoholic or an addict, which doesn't particularly bother me too much because I agreed with the point that was made back when this criteria changed a couple of years back, that there were certainly, frankly, people in my field who really probably didn't really have a good handle on it. And also, too, just the power of the word dependent or alcoholic or addict. It's a pretty powerful word, especially when you consider that there were, in the DSM-4 days, there were certainly people out there who had pretty significant alcohol and drinking problems who escaped that diagnosis, in my opinion, simply because of how something got phrased or how something was written down on an evaluation or report. Sometime I may do another video on just the things that I'd seen or heard over the years about how different life situations would be assessed one way by myself and differently by somebody else. But anyway, back to the here and now use disorder criteria. One of the things that I like to repeat, because it bears repeating, is that I, for one, am not particularly concerned, I don't focus at least, on the substance of choice, whether it's alcohol or some other drug. It's what the person does. It's the behavior around the drug. That's the part that matters a great deal. And depending on how a body reacts to a drug, or how the person's mind, how their thoughts and how their feelings are responding around the drug, that's the part that affects other people. So, first thing, in no particular order, but is the person using their substance of choice above and beyond a predetermined or preconsidered limit? That's not real complicated. A person's going out tonight and they're saying, okay, tonight I'm going to have one, maybe two, and then I'll stop. Are they stopping? That's really what it's all about. The person buys their bag, they buy their drugs thinking it's going to last through the weekend, and they're out by Thursday. That kind of thing. How are they doing as far as work, school, or home is concerned? When I've asked people in the past what they think the first sign of a drinking or drug problem is, the common response that I get is that the first sign of a problem would be when they lost their job or they lost their family. And while I understand on one hand that's pretty important, that's actually kind of the point itself. Because that's so important, that's not going to be an early stage sign. That's going to be a late stage sign. By the time something like that happens, lots of other things have happened first. Before somebody walks out on the door on you and says, we're done because of your drinking or using, if the person's being honest about it, something happened first. Words were exchanged, glances were exchanged, some kind of comment, some kind of observation, some kind of lower level change occurred first. What was probably most likely is that the person kind of blew it off at the time, or figured, well, that's just the way that person is, or they're being too controlling or something like that. The person found a way to not pay attention to it, when the fact of the matter is maybe they should have. So what happened first? Same thing with jobs. People just don't all of a sudden lose jobs. Again, if the person is backing things up, what happened first? They may not have seemed like big deals at the time. And even if the person can't see anything like that, they do have the obligation, or well, not an obligation, I suppose, but they certainly have the right to at least ask, was there something that happened? Why is this going on? Because, I mean, when it comes to jobs, I mean, certainly there are economic issues and there are other issues. The company wants to go in another direction. It may seem fairly sudden, and in some of those cases, perhaps it is. But when it comes to some of my alcohol and drug using clients over the years, sometimes their use nicely coincides with what the company wants to do anyway. And it's important for the person to try to clarify all that, if that's what they want to do. Use in situations in which the use is physically hazardous. Obviously, drinking and driving is the most obvious one. By the time a person usually gets stopped for a DUI, they probably drank or drove at least 20 to 30 times before in their life, maybe up to 200 or 300 times. Doesn't mean the person was aware of it, doesn't mean the person was conscious of it at the time or anything like that. It just means these things happen, because it's just statistically really unlikely the person could get stopped for drinking and driving the very first time that they do it. So, once the person becomes aware of what they're doing, or at least when somebody else makes the observation that they're doing what they're doing, because often it doesn't occur to the person themselves, somebody else says something. So from that point forward, if the person's thinking, well, yeah, I guess they did have a point, I should probably look at that, I should probably do something about it. Okay? So, do they? Do they make these changes? Do they follow through on that observation that I should probably pay more attention to this? Do they continue to do what they're doing without any significant change? And this criteria can also occur when the person's not driving at all. Excuse me. Sometimes a person might acknowledge that there was a period in their life where they're hanging around certain people in certain places, doing certain things at certain times of the week, and they look back in that period in their life and they go, ooh, that could have ended badly. And if I had not been drinking or using the way that I was at that point, I probably would not have been around those people. I wouldn't have been doing any of those things or been introduced to any of those things. Is that a situation where use is physically hazardous? It's at least worth looking at. Social interpersonal problems being made worse by use. Flat out, if I'm around somebody that I care about, and that person has made it clear, I am not comfortable with you drinking or using, I do not want you to do it. I don't want you to do it as often as you're doing it. I want you to make changes. I am unhappy with this. Okay? Real simple question then. Are any changes made? Now again, sometimes clients will tell me, well, that was just my mom. Moms say that because that's what moms do. Well, moms do tend to be kind of careful. On the other hand, does mom have a point? And even if I acknowledge mom has a slight point, am I making any changes? Am I doing anything about it? Excuse me again. If it's a friend, a significant other, again, am I paying attention to this? Am I paying attention to it in an early stage rather than letting it grow and fester and just become worse? Am I going through any kind of withdrawal? That one's pretty much a no-brainer. I've always found it funny that when list disorder criteria is written out in most books or manuals or questionnaires or whatever, this one probably should come down the list, but it's usually listed a little higher in the list. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe the idea is that we go over all this criteria And a person will say, well, no, maybe that one. Oh, but withdrawal, hell no. I mean, never been through that. Okay. I mean, alcohol withdrawal, that's the DTs, the shakes, and all those other kind of things. And I can't honestly suggest those are things that generally happen to people in early stage or middle stage problems. That tends to be more of a end of the road sort of thing. And by then, usually most people who are around, if there's anybody else still around, most people are aware that that's not a good thing. Let's see what else. Tolerance. Developing a tolerance to a drink or drug does not make somebody an alcoholic or an addict, because again, we can't use those terms anymore, remember? But it can certainly be the sign of a problem. It is important to understand people do not develop a tolerance naturally. A person can't say, well, back when I was 15 or 16, 2 cans of beer and I'd get sleepy and stupid and I'd throw up or whatever, but by the time I was 17 or 18 I could finish off a 12-pack and not do anything. Well, that must have been because I was a growing boy, or it must have been because I was just getting used to it or something. Well, however a person wants to phrase it, if the person can handle more of their substance of choice without a dramatic change in effect, that's tolerance. And tolerance does not certainly automatically make anybody anything, but it's certainly not a normal thing. It is not a healthy thing. It is something that the person should use to explore other things about their use. Is the person spending a lot of time either getting their substance, using their substance, or recovering from it? Now, this criteria will pop up in a person's life in different ways depending on whether their substance of choice is legal or not. If you're of age, getting alcohol is not that big a deal. You go where the big neon sign is or whatever and you walk in and you get it, as long as they're open. If you go in when they're not open and you break in, that would be a problem and that would not be legal. But assuming that that's all in the up and up, you don't really then need to spend a lot of time planning how to get it. Just got to make sure there's gas in the car and you're good. If, on the other hand, your substance of choice is not legal, then it becomes a little bit more of an issue. Is your normal supplier still available? Did they just get busted recently? Do you have an incentive to believe that perhaps they were detained an unusually short period of time, suggesting perhaps they're now cooperating with law enforcement? Problems. And then, of course, the person can get their substance of choice. They gotta figure out when they're going to use it, when they're not around anybody else. Because again, if you're not using something legal, generally, if you're using something that's not legal, you're not really going to post a video of when you're using. It would attract unwanted attention. And then, of course, there's recovery time, and that would be something that any mind-altering substance user might need to set up. But if a person's using a drug of choice non-problematically, recovery time is usually not that big an issue because the person's not using enough in the first place to require planned-out recovery time. These people that I'm talking about who don't have a problem with their substance of choice still may not do very much on Sundays, but that's just because of how their life is led or their personal custom, matter of choice, whatever. This person, on the other hand, if we're dealing with use disorder criteria, this would be a person who very definitely needs to block out recovery time just so they can be remotely functional again on Monday or whenever the beginning of their week is. If it's not that day of the week, if they have a different work schedule. If they work food service or whatever, where their weekend, so to speak, is in the middle of the week or on a Monday, then again, just adjust the days of the week accordingly. But if a person needs recovery time because of what they drank or used the night before, then yeah, this is definitely one to start looking at. Has the person tried to cut back or stop in the past? Again, really pretty simple. If it's occurred to somebody that they should probably be more careful about this and what they're doing, then yeah, there's probably a problem of some kind. And especially if the person's doing this for reasons that are beyond, I want to be clean to pass a drug test, or actually that's pretty much it. Other than that, if a person's thinking about stopping, slowing down, that's at least the point that they should probably be talking about it with somebody. See if we're still in the middle stage, or whether there are other things going on. What's happening with social, occupational, recreational activities? It's not unusual for me to have people who live a life where they're spending time on at least one other thing that they consider to be important, something outside of the job. Softball jocks, guys who like playing in 2 or 3 competitive leagues, or they've got some other sport, or they're in some kind of community group, or they're in a band, or they like collecting stamps, whatever it is. Only to find that their life while using a certain substance takes them away from whatever this may be that they liked doing. That again, simply put, means that this is worth looking at a little bit more carefully. And then probably the big one, person continuing to use despite, as I say, knowledge of persistent or recurrent physical psychological problems likely to be caused or exacerbated by the substance. In English, I've got a health condition. I know I've got a health condition. I know my health condition is not one where drinking or using is a good idea. And I know all this and I understand all this, but I do it anyway. Bing, 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 bing. This is not a good thing. It's not unusual that I'll go over this with somebody and the person will respond by saying, well, yeah, I'm still doing it, but I'm not doing it nearly as much as I used to. Okay. So I'm going over the cliff at 5 miles an hour rather than 55 miles an hour. Is that progress? Kind of. It's still not a good thing. These are the kind of things to look at then. These are the kind of things to just think about. I can spend a lot more time talking about any one of these, and perhaps I will in the future. But that at least is a good start to go over diagnostic criteria to determine use disorders, or what we used to call abuse or dependency. Got more questions for me? Hit me up! info@DUI Online Education. Don't forget the hyphens. DUI-Online-Education.com. And if you really want to, I do sometimes actually answer my phone, 815-915-4055 for groups and classes and things and stuff. Hope things are well. Take care.